Sweet. We're rolling. Appreciate you guys joining me here today. We're going to talk a little bit about building a practice plan. I was just telling these guys, I think we have a very unique opportunity to talk about a bunch of different styles from the private sector and building a lesson plan almost to college level to, a big organization where you have maybe, a ton of players and we're trying to build a good infield practice plan, right? So we got Kyle here from, maybe bringing that private sector type of thing. We got Brandon bringing kind of the organizational side of things. And we got Barrett talking from the college side of things. So, that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Briefly go over kind of the structure of your practice plan and the reasoning behind the order, right? So, do you set aside time for, for how long for a throwing program, stretching, glove work, and feel free to break down, your timing of it too, right? So I'll let Szink start off with that one.
Yeah. So in my experiences, I've been with travel organizations. I've been with teams that I've run with, many different levels. So my experience is more on, in terms of building the practice plan, is more on the travel side, the high school side, and some of the youth, some of the middle school. So what I was kind of forced to do in the many spots that I've been in is work in certain parameters. So, we might only see the guys once a week or twice a week. So I try to hit on as much as I can. And then obviously we're going to start our practices in the winter and go up until our season, which may be February for high school or April for your younger guys. But what I would always try and do is have some sort of progressive curriculum, have an idea of really every month what I wanted to hit on or touch on. And, assuming, Tyler, we're talking infield right now, yeah. We would go over our throwing program and, in some cases I had to come up with that. In other cases, we had some really good throwing coaches that would come up with it. And then if it was infielders, I would try and incorporate, my background being an infielder, I try and incorporate stuff that was, or throws that were specific to what our infield positions would see or do. And then, build on those fundamentals. So again, we're just talking like that first month, 2-month window, build on the fundamentals, build on kind of the individual work. As we move down the line, then we get to group and teamwork. And then as you move into the season, it's really full on team. For, like I said, from my experiences, you guys are probably different. I'm sure you guys have longer timelines or more, more time with your guys, especially you, Barrett, in the college ranks. But that's kind of how I started to build my plans. Like I said, have a progression, so that way we're keeping it almost fresh every week. If it's a weekly or a biweekly practice. When I was with Bo Jackson, Tyler, this. We did camps. So our team players may be in practice once a week. Mm-hmm. But they would jump in a camp or a throwing program clinic or something else in that week to do almost more of an individualized, whatever they may need. So if it just as an example, our shortstop last year needed arm strength, help with his arm strength. So he jumped into a camp with one of our pitching coaches who was running just a throwing program. He jumped into that. So offering those and Kyle, you're probably used to it in the academy setting, offering those different avenues for those guys to get both their teamwork down the line when you get close to the season, and then also individual work.
Yeah, you got a tough. That's a tough situation where you might only have a practice with those guys maybe once a week, right? At most. So is there something, or did you ever send them home with stuff to do to make sure they were still, getting their reps in, right? Was there a plan that you would send with them for the rest of the week?
Yeah. So each guy would get a throwing program. And I know, I know everyone's kind of got a different thing. So it wasn't a hey, you need to do this. It was kind of a recommended throwing program. And then we would harp on, hey, get your glove work in, the stuff that we do. We wouldn't really send them home with specific drills, but I think again, we had a ton of teams that we were working with at the same time. So we tried to keep it almost giving the coaches different ideas to give their players, because they were really on top of what their players were doing. So if we gave them drills or ideas, plans for their players to follow, most of the coaches were really on top of it and keeping up with that stuff.
Yeah. Kyle, from the academy side of things, break down like how you structure, a lesson, right? If we were doing a one-on-one lesson, how are you structuring that? Whether, and you can break it down from a half hour to an hour session too, right?
Yeah. No, I think there's pretty much two distinct differences. There's the half hour, like individual lesson, and I have a lot of like hour, kind of like Szink was talking about, like camp settings. Like I ran 3 or 4 camps this past winter where it's like 15 or 20 kids. So there's those two kind of differences. Now, both of them kind of start off the same way though. I'll say both of them, I will take the first 5 minutes to go through like a legitimate dynamic warm-up and mobility session. Like not just your like, oh, go do high knees and butt kickers while I like go in the back office. Like I try to I try to take it to somewhat of the next level. And I use some stuff from Eric Cressy. He's got a bunch of good free stuff online. And I think if you literally just Google Eric Cressy, like mobility warm-up, he'll pop up with his whole progression of stuff. And the fact that I didn't even know who Cressy was till I was like in a junior in college is like kind of crazy. So those type of resources I think are good, because for a team-wide, all the way up from probably pro ball, high school, and then even when I'm working with my 14-year-old and we got 5 minutes, just get our heart rate going. So we'll do a pretty good warm-up, and then I'll go into throwing progression. Now, my throwing progression when I'm with the academy is different than when I'm like on my high school team, because it's more of like a skill development throwing than it is just like a throwing progression of trying to build arm strength or throwing progression to try to get out the distance. It's more like, here, I think I can share it because I was going through my Twitter and I found this from Kai. I think I should be able to. It's a lot of stuff like this that is like rapid fire in a small stationary period where they can be throwing into a net and I can just have my bucket of balls and they're getting their arm loose, but we're also getting some sort of development from like a hand perspective or like this hip hinge, so it's stuff like this that I think I have the same thing. I might. Yeah, I have it right here actually. So this is like the same exact pretty much concept where this is just like a warm up right when we started and we're just throwing. These two are college kids that were coming back to train during winter break, but they're throwing to each other. We're in one cage. We don't need that much space opposed to like when I'm with my high school team out on the field, and we can work on our exchanges for the other guy receiving, and they can work on getting their arm loose in a small period of time. But once we do our throwing progression, we kind of go into our hand small drill work that we kind of talked about like last week, and we kind of progress into feet after that. So I'd say it's mobility and warm up, small throwing progression, hands, feet is kind of a general layout, whether or not that's 30-minute individual lesson or within an hour with the whole camp setting.
Sure.
Hey, Kyle, did you find, I've done infield lessons too. Did you find yourself throwing every lesson, or did you have kind of an idea? Like sometimes I had a guy that I knew just needed handwork for the whole 30 minutes. Do you cater it, or do you?
I don't even, I'd say I probably don't do any sort of throwing if I'm doing individualized lessons for the first 2 sessions. Just because, like I said, the private entry is different. If they're coming to pay me to do a lesson, a lot of it has to do with like the perception, and I don't want that parent to think we're just playing catch for 15 minutes and like, oh, we only have 15 more minutes to like actually do some sort of developmental work, So I think I think then like next level to like when I have a high school kid come in with me, that's a little different. If they're like, they play for the travel organization that I'm a part of and I coach with, like I know that I can do those things and those parents are going to trust that what we're working on is truly like working our different slots, working on our posture. Like I can use those words and you're like, okay, he's getting better, opposed to when I have my youth level, like you said, I pretty much do my warm up and I'll go straight into kind of small drills.
Yeah.
Right.
Barrett, we have a different perspective almost where time constraints are a big issue, right? Where NCAA compliance will get on us if we go over our time, right? So, go ahead and break down, your practice progression for infielders and how you structure it.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on, the season we're in, depending on the year. With the fall, we get the 20-hour practice season, and then we go into the winter, which is the 8-hour a week individual sessions, skill development, and then we get back into the spring, which turns back into, that 20-hour week. But in the fall, when you get a lot of new guys back for the first time, typically we try to structure it in a way that we're going to handle load. Especially the young guys or junior college guys, new guys that are coming in the program, we're going to throw a lot from an infield standpoint. And even in a practice setting, we'll go our dynamic warm up typically to start. We'll do a base running, get a sweat going, throw, and then go into team and individual defense. So from that standpoint, for the next, practice, first half hour stretching, base running. Then you go into 2 hours of arm care, individual defense, and then team defense. They're going to be throwing a lot. So we try to structure in a way their bodies are warm. They'll do band work before they actually throw. Typically, depending on hours, the guys have to get it in before they do anything. It's more of an arm maintenance, strength of the shoulders type of deal. And then once we get into the 8-hour week, it becomes more skill specific to the type of position they're playing. Now, most infielders, I want to throw athletic from different arm angles and be a first baseman throwing like shortstops if we can. But a lot of the throwing will be more specific, tailored to position. So when we break it down into corner infielders, in middle infielders or regular infielders, I say regular infielders or first baseman, we'll kind of put them in positions to throw that they'll see in game-like situations. But in the fall, early, it's more of lengthen it out, try and get guys to stretch it out, and then on the way back in, pull it down. The Jaeger program, I'm a big fan of. So we kind of stick to that outline. We're not pulling it down every day. And then once we get into, as we back it up, actually we'll get into relays, footwork, that type of stuff as we come back in. Laying it out, working tags. Get into 90 feet, we start to let it rip a little bit, and then you get into 30 to 60 feet, we start changing arm angles, quick catch. Every day is a little bit different. We try to keep it quick and fast-paced and mix it up a little bit so these guys aren't doing the same thing every day, kind of put them on their toes and put them in positions where they have to make decisions quickly. When you got 8 to 12 guys at the same time, keep them on the same plan for the most part. So just kind of putting them in situations to be athletic and this is the biggest thing when we're structuring the throwing segments, depending on the hours.
Yeah, 100%. Do you guys mind now going into, and I'm just, assuming here, and I might be missing a step, from throwing, a lot of coaches will go, right into some glove work, right? And I think Kyle even mentioned it, that he'll structure his practices like that. What are some, other progressions into, glove work, footwork drills that you'll do on a daily basis with your infielders? And you don't have to get into great detail what the drills are, but maybe take us through a progression on how you structure that, right? So Kyle, I'll let you kind of start with that.
Yeah. So like I said, I kind of, after our small throwing progressions, I kind of break off into a knee drill where like they're on their knee doing their small hand, small drill footwork. And once we get that down, I kind of can see how their gloves working, and we progress into our 2-step and our 4-step patterns. And once we've done that, I'll kind of back it up a little bit, and I'll do some on my knee. I'll hit off, start getting the fungo into place, because all these other ones are just kind of varying my hops. We talked about that last week, how I kind of do some snake hops, some rolls, some bounces, all of that. But then I'll back up and I'll start hitting some ground balls, and I'll hit a middle forehand, backhand, and just kind of from me in a private sector trying to feel out where they're at. And I feel like once I've done our small drills, done our 2-step and 4-step, and then backed it up a little bit, I can kind of progress into specializing in whether or not I need to work on their forehand, I need to work on their backhand. Oh, when I did my one slow roller, their pattern wasn't great. So I think those first like 5 or 10 minutes for me is a lot different from you guys in the instance that you see these kids every day for probably months. So you already know what their skill set is and what they're bringing every day to practice. I feel like within the first 10 minutes of doing lessons, you have to know very quickly what you're working with and what's going to be the best skill development for them for the rest of that lesson and as the weeks progress.
Sure. Barrett, kind of go into a little bit more detail about your glove work and footwork drills that you get into before you get into even some ground ball work, right?
Yeah, we typically keep a pretty similar structure as far as plan when we go into you could call it ball maintenance, lead ups, and then individual defense. So, along the throwing lines, we'll do like a 4 corners throwing drill where we're throwing around the horn, across, tags, kind of random, just to make sure guys are moving the ball quick, throwing accuracy. I talk to our guys when they throw that we're going to throw the ball, just to keep it really simple. So we get to that part, and then that's about 3 minutes or so, 3-4 minutes. We break off and I was fortunate enough, on the pro side to be able to play in a system when Ron Washington was the manager of the Rangers. So we did wash drills every day. You see a lot of Twitter videos with Wash and the Braves. And my favorite one's the one with Marcus Semien. So we do that on a daily basis when we're working, knees, paddles, small glove, forehands, backhands, one hand. We'll get into a roll ball routine where our guys are doing it at the same time, and they're going to their own position, and they're rolling balls on an angle where they would see it off the bat. So they're working their prep step. For us, it's a right left hop. Depending on the guy, we may mix it up, but one hand and 2 hands with no glove, and then 1 hand and 2 hands with the glove. We'll add backhands. We'll add forehands. I like to get into where I roll the ball. I'll put everybody at short. And, basically we talk about making routine plays at a high level and, rolling balls firmer, softer, with a bounce to it, balls that they're going to be really aggressive to. And just to make sure that, I have eyes on them to put them in positions to really move their feet. For me, I think infielders have really good feet. So I want these guys to really be aggressive and attack. And so our drills, start with the hands, isolate the hands and then get them into where they're starting to get their feet moving. We'll put them in positions where it's a little bit isolated, and I'm, getting them to put in positions to move their feet a little bit quicker. And then we'll go into a mass fungo, typically before we get into team defense, and we'll do typically 4 fungos. We'll have pitchers involved, a pitcher at second base, a pitcher at first. We have 2 coaches hitting. We'll have 2 more pitchers hitting fungos, and then 4 pitchers catching for those fungo hitters. We'd like to chart guys, from a college and stats, numbers are becoming a really big deal, and they've always have been. But just so guys get personal feedback of what they're doing, as far as making, glove touches, throwing accuracy, throwing errors, that type of stuff. And it's about an 8-minute drill. We'll do mass fungo. They'll throw for about 2 minutes to each base, and then 2 minutes back into each fungo guy. So we'll rotate that. They get right-handed and left-handed fungos. Then that's probably the extent of our drill work and on a daily basis. When we get into the individual segment, we'll go into a lot of double play feeds and slow roller work for corner infielders, first baseman. We'll talk pick routines and coming off the bag, double play footwork and all that. But as far as a mass, when we get in the practice session, it's pretty similar structure throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, real quick, going back to your your glove work, and you mentioned you're using the different gloves, right? From a paddle glove to I'd assume even just bare hand stuff, right?
Yep.
That stuff you would they would do like every single day. You were going bare hand, paddle glove, small glove, your glove, or did you mix that up on a daily basis? Like today we're just going paddle glove, and then the next day we're going bare hand. How would you break that up?
Typically the wash drills, we're using bare hand, small glove, and then regular glove every day. We'll mix in paddles when we can, when we have a little bit of extra time. BP, when guys are taking ground balls, we'll add the mini gloves and the paddles then. Certain days, when we do the mass fungo drill, I'll give guys a mini glove. Typically, I hand out one mini glove and one paddle just to make it a little bit tougher. And that guy's the victim of the day, I guess. So if you've got the paddle, you got the paddle. Now, the fungo guy's got to have savvy to them that they can't hit one hoppers and make the guy ranging 30 feet to his left, with a paddle. But that's typically how we'll do it. For the wash drills and the early lead ups and the same structure. But once we start getting into other things, we'll mix it with the paddle and the mini glove a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome. Szink, if you don't mind going into some detail on, the different glove work drills and footwork drills that you would do before you get into, your bigger part of practice.
Yeah, it's funny that Barrett brought up that Marcus Simeon video, because I actually posted that on Twitter. But I thought one of the great lines from it was from who was doing the interview, Harold Reynolds, I think, said that the key to being successful in the big leagues, and really at any level, I think, is just having a routine, right? So if we can create a routine as coaches to give to our players, this is one thing I always try to do. From a week-to-week basis was just give them some sort of hand routine, some sort of partner routine, to where myself or whoever I was coaching with that day could just be like, hey, let's get our 5-minute partner drills on our knees, and let's move to feet. Let's do whatever. But yeah, that's how we would try and structure it. We would, and it might vary day to day or week to week. But we would go glove, or we would go bare hand, we would go glove. In some cases, we would go paddles if we felt like we needed it. And then we would hop up on our feet. And this is one drill that I like, actually, not even a drill really. It's really just a routine thing. Jumping up and trying almost playing like pig with or horse with your partner, just throwing ground balls, trying to get it by your partner and getting each other's feet moving. And then going into group, like Barrett mentioned, going into different group settings or drills. So if we had, if it was a normal day, we got our fundamental work in, then we would jump into, our third baseman may go with one coach, middle guys may go with myself, and then first baseman with another coach. And we would just work on whatever that focus is for the day. And as we moved on, we would try and get some sort of game rep. Typically, we're, in the situations I've been in, we've had roughly 40 to 45 minutes per session to work with our infielders. And that includes throwing program, fundamentals, any group or small group work that we want to do, and then our game-like reps. So we had to work fast and with some sort of pace. And that's one thing I always told our guys is let's have some sort of purpose with our practices and some sort of pace with them. I call it the two P's. So we tried to, like I said, we tried to get it all in 40 to 45 minutes. Some days we didn't. Some days we did. If we didn't, then we just kind of rolled it over to the next week or the next day, whatever the next practice was.
Sure.
Hey, real quick, I like what Brandon said about the routine. I think the big thing, from a development standpoint, and as just kind of seeing it. I know Brandon sees this, at the highest level too, and he's been able to see it a lot, at all levels. But as you progress, and the best of the best have routines in everything they do, and part of the goal from our standpoint here at Kent is to put them in a position to have a routine every single day. So even when we go to Tyler, this game days, it can get a little bit crazy, rainouts. Everybody deals with this stuff, but give guys information and plans where they can go do it on their own. Because there's days you may not take batting practice and have, fungos, and there may be, from our level, there may be days where you can't do a pregame in out. But guys can go out in the outfield and roll balls to each other, and they can do wash drills, or they can do, glove work and footwork and whatever it is. So I like what he said about the routine. I think that's giving guys a routine where they feel confident and comfortable. So if they're not getting stuff, now all of a sudden they can just go and be confident and play free.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, Tyler, to kind of expand on that too, one, like I mentioned, it was at Bo Jackson, for example, it was me, Eric Stamets, and Zarly Zaleski were our three big infield guys. And we would sit, we work together all the time. So we would sit and chat, or we would develop different drills, or even just like have full out game plans that we kind of would bounce off each other and know kind of pre-practice or even pre-week what we wanted to do. So then when we got into it, we tried to have as little conversation with the players as possible. And most of our guys, I would say, 60 to 70% of our guys were kind of rolling over at the high school level, rolling over from the previous year. So we weren't having to explain things over. It was kind of a, hey, let's do this drill. Maybe we've done it before, or maybe, hey, this is a new drill. Introduce it, talk 2-3 minutes about it, and then get right into it. And if we have minor tweaks we have to make or whatever, we will. Or if it's a major disaster, then we try and jump to the next drill or make whatever changes we need to on the fly there.
Yeah, I think Barrett mentioned it about like breaking down based off of the type of the point of the year that we're in, right? In the fall, we could probably change some drills up on some guys, right? Because guys hate maybe some new drills, right? You get uncomfortable, and you get away from your routine, right? So in the fall, for us on the college side of things, it's a great time to introduce some challenging drills. And then when we move towards, January, February, when it's about, competition time, now they have that routine. Let's get them into it, right? Maybe it's just we're going out and hitting some mass ground balls, right? And you're just going to take ground balls, starting to feel your feet under you a little bit, instead of maybe breaking out the machine and mixing up some spins and giving you some crazy hops. That's just an example that I can think of. But, yeah, I think you guys hit it on, the nail on the head with that, right? Now, there is a point where we do have to challenge our guys, and we don't want to take that away from it, because challenge does make players better, right? But also we want them to be comfortable when it comes game time, right? Yeah. I think, from a college side of things, we have a challenge where it's really hard to specialize practice too, right, to the individual. And Szink and I have had this conversation before, where from the lesson side, super easy, right? And maybe even from a big organization where you have a lot of hands on deck, you can maybe even group guys and break guys up, whether it's based off their strengths or weaknesses. But Barrett, is there anything that you've done from a practice side of things to tailor it towards individuals, whether that's hey, these guys need to go and not by position, but these guys go field ground balls over on this side because they need to work on this, and these guys go field on this side of the field and field these types of ground balls? I don't know. That's just an example. Is there anything that you do to specialize it for different individuals?
When it comes to it first, like, I guess taking a step back, get here in the fall, the goal is to have everybody basically speaking the same language. Mm-hmm. So when we get into the drill work, we get into that stuff, we're all on the same page, and it's kind of same philosophy for everybody. Same verbiage, same language, so everybody's speaking the same thing. And then now when we get into the individual segment, that 8-hour week, kind of tailor it into that. And as we go, maybe later in the fall, if everybody starts picking up quick, that language, that ideology, the things we talk about, now you can go into a little bit of, hey, so-and-so is having this issue with balls right at them, or hey, so-and-so is kind of having this issue with backhands. And now we can start kind of going through. And when it gets into the individuality part, I want guys to come to – and development's about the communication side. So just like when you're in the cage one-on-one, you want guys to be able to explain what they're feeling, what, what you're saying, relay, that type of stuff. Same thing on the infield side. Now, when we take that step forward, it's like, hey, I want our shortstop to come up to me and say, hey, that one hop, I came to get it, but my left foot was in front. I don't know if I should reach further, and then now all of a sudden you can go in and try and isolate those things. And maybe it's a little bit more one-on-one. I think when we go into individuality, because everybody is still a little bit different. Everybody moves a little bit different. Everybody throws from different arm slots. Maybe some guys need to learn how to throw from different arm slots better. So we'll put them in, on one knee. We'll put them. We do a 1-3-5 drill. We have guys who, try to scrape the ground, maybe turn into competitions that way. But it depends on the guy, depends on the day. But for the most part, in our time window as far as team practice, we try to keep it same language, same verbiage, and then maybe in BP, maybe in early work or whatever. That's when we'll try to go individuality with guys. Go from there.
Sure. And I always talk about, and college is almost more about like team development because it's so hard to break it down from a time standpoint. And man, like everybody on deck, we got 4 coaches. So it's a little tougher to take that time and set aside for the individual player development. Right. So, and I like how you mentioned BP and early work are a great time to actually do that, right? And then when we get into our group of 11 or 12 infielders, we have to be speaking the same language, right? We got to be probably going over the same drill, working on the same stuff, right? So, Szink, is there anything that you'd like to add, maybe from a bigger organization, bigger, I guess, more numbers involved? How do you break it down to, specialize it for certain guys, right?
Yeah. So what, you and I have talked about, it's very, very tough at the travel ball level when you have so many guys, so many teams going in different directions during the season. You can't pull, unless you really, really trust your game changer keeper, you can't pull data and really accurate data off of anywhere. So it's definitely tough to specialize your drills and your practices like that. What we would do, 2 things we would do during our practices, especially our off-season practices, we would try and have an extra, what we call a roving coach for practices. So just as an example, if we knew we were doing full fungo that day, 4-6-3, 4-6-6, 4, all the different stuff that we do, we would try and have myself or Eric or Zarler, or somebody out there that's an infield guy talking players through maybe what they did wrong or how they can do something differently. That gave the players a chance to ask questions. Sometimes we would jump in with them. That more so on the just having fun side, not really the practice side, but we would just, like I said, jump in, talk with guys, maybe show them something like, hey, Zarly hit me a ground ball that same one you just hit, and I'll show this guy how it's done, or different different scenarios like that. In some cases, if we just saw that a guy wasn't getting it, then we would have same thing as hitting, right? You would try to have an individual conversation with them, a focused conversation, and if you felt that they needed additional work, you would try and find somebody that specializes or is really good at explaining that, and have them work on the side with. I'm sure Kyle does the same thing. Have them work on the side with that coach, whether it's in the practice setting or a lesson setting or another camp or clinic setting that maybe we offer.
Yeah, Kyle, is there anything you'd like to add? You kind of come from the different side where a lot of your stuff that you do is specialized, right? It's tailored to that individual.
Yeah,
so you like that?
I think it's funny how it does kind of, the timing piece does go with kind of what Barrett said with college baseball, where I think it's my job to understand where they're at in their season. And if we're in our winter months, like, I can break down and I can talk more about our footwork patterns, and we can we can break things down to a smaller level, opposed to if they're coming to me for an individual lesson and it's in the middle of the spring. I think there's a lot to be said about me just keeping their confidence up, giving them a little bit of rhythm, making them feel a little bit more smooth, give them some swag, you know what I'm saying? And just like kind of sending them out that weekend for their tournament, you know, and not just being like, oh, I went to Kyle to work at the academy this week and he said like I was terrible. Like I couldn't field anything, you know, like, so I think there's a lot to be said about my job, or all of us as coaches, like knowing what type of time of year it is and when we can break that stuff down. I just think it's funny how the college season kind of progresses in the same way, where I like, even though I'm doing individualized lessons, I can really break it down more if we're kind of going into the winter months opposed to it's spring or they're in the middle of their fall showcase season, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like, Kyle, that's a great point. It's almost like pitchers, right? When pitchers do lessons, they're not going to throw off the mound 100% in November after they just played a full fall season. They're probably going to work on your weighted ball drills, your movement drills, your what we call ramp up drills, or what we determined as ramp up drills at Bo Jackson. And then once you start to get into your Januaries and your Februaries, really key in on your you know, your full throws, your bullpens, your working with the catcher, all that different stuff that comes along with trying to get ready for the season.
Yeah. And I think the weather plays a cool factor from my end, where like we're kind of forced in the winter to go into our 1 or 2 cages in an indoor facility, you know, so it's a good excuse for me to be like, hey, listen, we got the next 8 weeks. You guys have always, I think I might have said this to you guys last week, Szink and Tyler, like everyone does hitting lessons and everyone knows what their rhythm, load, stride, separation, extent, they know all of that. And then you talk to a high schooler about like, what's your fielding progression? And they're just like, I field it and I throw it. Like, what are you talking about? You know? So like, it's a good time, like in the winter, to be like, we're going to break this down. We're going to work on like how we're showing our hands, getting to our midline, like using this terminology, kind of like you talked about, Szink and Barrett, getting on the same page, you know, like with my terminology throughout like my winter camps. So then by the end of the camp, as we're going into the spring, I can start putting the mini hack attacks. I can get high school kids to just start feeding those and like getting more mass fungos, opening the cage ups in the facility, and kind of progressing into what's going to be more game-like speed and hops and all that stuff.
Yeah. And from the college side, right, your winter almost sounds like our fall, right, when guys get on campus.
Yeah.
You know, and Barrett mentioned being on the same page, speaking the same language. You know, we're going to break down the fundamentals. And even though the seniors are back for their 4th year, right, we're still going to go over it with them. And probably show them our slideshows and all that, and just get everybody on the same page. And then as we start moving towards, you know, November, now we're going to start ramping some stuff up, right? And then once they get back in January, you know, we got to get right after it. So you're hoping from the college side of things in December that they're still working, right? So
do you guys do any sort of like team fundies in the fall, or do you guys kind of wait to start ramping that up till right before you get back for the season? Or like, are you guys hammering all your first and thirds, like your bunt Ds, like right when you show up in the fall?
Barrett,
Yeah, so we kind of slowly incorporate and you know, progress into the team defense and science, all that stuff. But you know, here, and I'm glad you know, our head coach, he's really big on reps for our infielders, like touches. So it's about getting them as many fungos and touches as we can. You guys know not every ground ball is the same, you know, or every ground ball is different than the one previous. So we try to get our guys as many ground balls as we can. We'll do fungo, probably mass fungo, as far as like a structured mass fungo 2 to 3 times a week. You know, if we do the structured mass fungo in BP, they're taking it live. We'll do it a live fungo every day, whether it's situations from you know, the head coach hitting them, or where we're playing like a hit and run game where the hitters, you know, we're flipping or throwing, and the hitters have to hit ground balls, and our guys are getting live ground balls off the bat. To where if they're not doing that part during team defense, now they're getting mass fungos during BP. So we're trying to maximize as many touches as we can for our guys. They may not throw every time, but they're going to throw a lot. I think a lot of consistency comes from making throws. So it depends day to day, but we're going to try to get them as many touches as we can. I think that's the big thing we talk about is touches.
Kyle, I think it depends where you're at too. Like if you're up north, you're probably going to start your team stuff a little earlier.
Yeah.
And then get into your individuals because they're 8-hour weeks when we get into individuals, probably later on. Where if you're down south, right, you're probably going to ride out individuals as long as you can and finish up with team stuff before, winter break and sending them home because team stuff's going to be right around the corner in the competition. So it probably just depends on where you're at. Now, even during the individual sections, right, and we go through practice, I think it is important to still set aside time to talk about some of those bigger, team defense stuff when you're with your individual group. For example, like we'll still talk about cuts and relays and how, maybe how communication is, knowing your outfielders from a rundown standpoint, where everyone's supposed to move, and maybe you might not have catchers or pitchers there, but what their responsibilities are compared to yours, right? So I think it's still important to mention it even when you're in the individual section, right? But, if it just depends where you're at when you can do those sorts of things. So I think it is important to mention it all the time, right? Even if you're in individuals, to still mention all those team activities. Yeah,
just kind of piggybacking from you really quick. I think the other part to this is there's, with us, the hour limit's such a big deal. And there's a lot of fundamental stuff that's going to happen during a game, and we want our guys to be as fundamental as possible. So from the cut relay, the routine ground ball to the playing catch, hitting guys in the chest, to double play feeds, to whatever it is, mixing arm angles, whatever they're going to see most often in a game, I want to make sure, and us as a staff want to make sure that we cover it day to day. So if it's from your throwing routine to your indie to your team defense, we got to make sure we cover as much as possible on a daily basis, even though overall practice plan changes. I want to make sure that, we try to cover. If we're not doing cuts and relays and team defense, we're still working on it in, our throwing progression. We may not turn double plays in practice, but we may do double play feeds in our, at the end of our throwing progression or in the NDD. So that's kind of making sure, starting from the top from structure, what the team plan is, we tailor the individual segment off of that.
That brings up, you remind me of something I wanted to ask you guys earlier, because you're just talking about how important your time is at the college level. Do you guys, and I don't want to take too many steps back, but do you guys time your throwing progression? Like, hey, we're doing our skill throws for the next 2 minutes. Like, hey, we're throwing at 120 feet for the next 2. We're doing our relays. Like, you're doing your pull downs. Like, because with how important time is, I feel like there's a lot of people that, at least when I was playing, like, I would take a good 10, 12 minutes to get out to my long toss. Meanwhile, Jack and Joe over there just went out to 80 feet and they're back and they're hanging out, twiddling their thumbs,
Yeah. Kyle, before I let Barrett answer this was actually going to lead to my final question was, is there any tips you guys have for, building and helping coaches run like practices efficiently, right? And knowing time constraints, whether you're doing a lesson, you have an hour, or Barrett, when we're in, whether we're in 8 hours or 20-hour weeks. So yeah, I think when we're in the college level, right, I think you have to, and it stinks because some guys take a little bit longer to warm up. We have to move quickly, right? We have to move efficiently. So we have to time it, and it's like, hey, you got 10 minutes, you got 12 minutes to go through your throwing progression. But that's where I think it's important that you add a lot of different stuff that Barrett's talking about, and it covers a wide range, whether it's double play feeds or cuts and relays into your throwing program. Barrett?
Yeah, so typically, on the practice plan, you have how long you're going to throw for. It's typically 10 to 15 minutes. I would say most often that 10 to 12 minute range. But I'll have a stopwatch, especially in the fall early, just so that way we're timing it. So I want our guys to throw for that whole time. And I'll be a little bit more on top of them early, so that way they're sticking to that plan, especially if we're trying to get guys to lengthen it out. Because like you said, some guys are like, I can throw 90 feet and I feel good. But they're not only making 90-foot throws, or they're not going to make 90-foot throws all the time. There's some of them making 120-foot throws. So that's a big part of the throwing progression as well. So, I try to time it, keep with the stopwatch. And, if coach says we've got 12 minutes, and Tyler, this, sometimes practice plans change. Coaches get rolling or whatever, but, I like to keep the stopwatch and make sure we're staying with it. And then each minute and a half, we'll get to a different distance. And as we come back in, maybe it comes to 45 seconds of, 60-foot quick catch, see who can make a guy drop it, and we'll just kind of keep going to the end. But we'll make sure we stick in that time and try and keep a structure to that throwing, especially early in the fall. Because as we get into the spring, it may not be as structured when we get into game days, because now it's becoming their day. But I want them to have a solid foundation of, okay, this is where it's been, this is what's expected, and then we kind of go from there.
Yeah, Kyle. To go off that from an organization standpoint, I've seen a ton of different stuff. I've seen like 15 minutes, I've seen 20 minutes, I've seen 30 minutes, a lot of for throwing. One thing I started to do was first day of practice, I would allot, call it 15 minutes, right? Call it 15 minutes of throwing. And then whatever program we were doing, whether it was timed throwing where we would throw at this distance for this long, like just say 2 minutes per or a minute and a half per throw, whatever we were doing, if we were doing rockers or whatever. And then we would go as we moved along to a different throwing program. What we started to do was we would throw so many throws per minute or per drill we were doing. Yeah, per throw we were doing. But what my point is, what I tried to do was, as we moved from week to week, I would try and shave minutes off. So I let guys start, if we were in November and we took we had our first practice and guys were taking 15 minutes, I would tell guys, hey, we took 15 minutes. Next week, let's do 14. The following week, let's do 13. And then by January, I was trying to get it down to less than 10 minutes. My ideal, and you guys know, like when you're in travel ball, you don't have a ton of time to warm up. So I tried to cut my overall warm up, my throwing warm up, to 8 minutes as best as I could. Now you would have guys go over, obviously, but Tyler, to answer your question, and I'll just answer my part here.
Well, Szink, real quick on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said you start off with 15 minutes. The next week was 14, right, is what you were saying. Are you still trying to get the same amount of throws? You were just trying to be quicker and have some pace to it, or were you actually cutting it back?
No. Yeah. So what I mentioned before is we always try to have a pace with practice, right? So we would, and you guys know this, at the high school and youth levels, guys don't do a whole lot in the off season typically. Maybe they're playing another sport. So they're trying to get back into it, trying to get back in the rhythm, trying to learn like Barrett said, learn the language, all that different stuff, all those different learning curves that we're trying to overcome that first week or couple weeks of practice. So maybe the first 2-3 weeks, Tyler, we're doing 15 minutes, but eventually my thought process would be is, once we start to learn the language, the timing, and know that, hey, I can get so many throws in this minute, then we try and cut it down to 8, 9, 10 minutes, whatever age level. It really varied, but it was around that time. So when we got into the summer, or if we started playing in April, if we were at the 14U level where I coached one year, to where we could get to a field, we could do our warm-ups and our throws in less than 20 minutes.
Sure. And
be ready for a game.
Okay. Kyle, what about you, man?
Yeah. Well, so your initial question before we were talking about throwing was just like advice for
coaches for, making things more efficient, right? And thinking that we have time constraints, or, hey, we're trying to cover everything. And we know we don't have all day, right? So go ahead.
I think the biggest thing, and Szynk's last point, whether or not he even knows he's really doing it, is just competition. Like competition amongst every age group, I think makes every drill more fun from a player's perspective. The intent and energy towards it just goes through the roof. Like, whether or not Szink knows that he's telling the kids, like, hey, you got to throw quicker. They're like, oh, okay, I'll throw quicker. You know, they're like, sure. You know, and then there's a pace that comes to them doing that. You know, so like, I have I feel like every session from my camp, at least, we end with some sort of competition, whether or not it is us fielding ground balls and trying to hit a big softball off a tee, you know, whether or not it's us doing some sort of 2 versus 2, like small drill, like competition, whatever it may be. I feel like competition amongst athletes, especially at all of your guys' level, even the high schoolers and youth kids I work with, it just brings out an effort that is better than just doing normal small drills. You know, when you just tell them we're going to just do this normal small drill, it's like, oh, we're doing this again. When you tell them like, hey, we're going to this little volleyball court, and I don't know if you guys ever seen Kai Correa's like little like 2 versus 2 small drill kind of competition thing, but it's freaking incredible. You know, like these kids are having the best time of their life. Meanwhile, their exchanges are through the roof, and they're working on actually their pushes and funneling and all that type of stuff at the same time. So I think competition, literally, if I had to say one word, makes everything better.
Yeah, I think that's pretty funny because now I think of it, whenever we play this game called Hits Game, right? And all of a sudden you see guys, you know, they're sprinting out to their position, you know, they're ready to go, they're fired up, and if you put something on the line, you know, it's game over. But if you say, hey, we're going out to do glove work, you know, it's like they're walking out to the line or walking out to the dirt. So I think that's pretty funny. But no, that's great stuff, guys. Awesome. And I get it. Like, you know, we come from all different backgrounds, but we have an idea. And I think we put that out there of how to properly build a good practice plan, right? From all different sectors, whether you're looking from the individual side of things and maybe the private sector, from a group where you might have up to 12 guys or 12 infielders out there. So I appreciate you taking your time on a Thursday night. But yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.